Everyone, and welcome back to what our new name is, and we'll be going by Fantasy Hockey Podcast with Fantalytica. And with me, as always, we have Robert Love, the creator of Fantalytica. And if you want to know more about it, please, I encourage you watch our first episode where I grill Rob and he gives a great detailed explanation of what to expect from it. But long story short, it definitely helps you in terms of drafting young prospects in the NHL Entry Draft for your fantasy hockey teams. So it's a very cool website. I highly recommend it. It comes out in the middle of January, so just something to keep an eye on. Follow them on Twitter, Fantalytica, and they'll just be giving you the updates there. So very cool in that regard. Moving forward, what we got planned for this episode is I don't want to be generic and following everybody else's podcast in terms of listing the big names and Doc and Cousins and Byram and Broberg and like Spencer Knight in terms of players going to have a big tournament. I think I want to highlight the Fantalytica tool a little bit more. And in doing so, what I did is I gave Rob a task. And the task was this: find 5 prospects outside of the second or first round and project them and see who Fantalytica projects as having a good season this season, and so will likely have a high impact going into the tournament. And so with that being said, Rob, I want to give the floor to you. Who was the first guy you were able to pick out in terms of thinking they're going to have a good tournament that not a lot of people know of?
Sure. So the first guy that comes to mind that I would think that 1% of World Junior fans will actually know anything about before going into this tournament. His name is, I'm pulling it up here. So his name is Ilya Safonov. And as you can imagine, he's on Team Russia. He's 19 years old, did not get drafted, but he's a big body, big forward. Right now, he's playing in the KHL. He hasn't played a single game in the other leagues. He's only gotten 1 assist in 22 games, but he is, by a lot of scouts that use eye test and a lot of data analytics guys, he is a very, very interesting player that you should be watching this year. He's probably going to be on the third line for Team Russia, and although he's not going to be playing playing with any of the big names like Amirov or Kuznetsov, he should actually do pretty well in the World Juniors. I don't expect anything more than a point per game. I mean, he's probably not going to get to a point per game, but I think anything over half a point per game at this World Juniors is a pretty reasonable expectation for this guy. And I should definitely expect him to be drafted as a overager in the next draft, especially considering that the European leagues are probably going to be more popular for scouts to watch, considering there's more games being played there. So I would definitely imagine Safonov is one of the guys that's going to be watched a lot.
Okay, perfect answer. Number 2, who did you find for us?
This guy is probably going to be pretty well known. He just got drafted in the second round, later in the second round, drafted by Philly. He's actually a pretty low point player right now, but in our model, he still looks pretty good. His name's Emil Andre. He is a defender for the Swedish team. And although he probably will, like I said, for the first player, he's probably not going to play that much. He's probably going to be on the third pair. But I expect him to do a lot better than people might imagine. He's a relatively small guy, but he's got a lot of skill. And last year he was a point per game defender in the J20 Super Elite. So he's a very, very interesting player. And definitely watch out for him.
Okay, so we have a young defender and older, bigger bruiser kind of guy.
Yeah.
Number 3, who do you got for us?
So I've got another guy that's on Team Sweden. He's probably well known within his respective NHL prospect pipeline fan base, but to a lot of people, you're not going to know who this guy is. So his name's Elmer Soderblom. He's a Red Wings draft pick of 2019 in the 6th round. Okay, but the thing about him is on EliteProspects.com, he is listed at 6'8". So he's a monster.
Yeah.
Right. He's 240 pounds. He's approaching 6'9". He could probably have a dunking contest with LeBron. So he's a huge dude. But the thing about him that is very, very, very interesting is that the kit that he has is high skill. He's got great hands. He's got a great way of blocking defenders off of him when he has the puck. And he's had a lot of success in Sweden so far. So when he got drafted by the Red Wings, he only had 17 points in 44 games, and that was back in 2018-19. Look to 2019-20, he was massively over a point per game. So he went from 17 points in 44 games to 55 points in 36 games. And for a big guy that's 6'8", it might not be too surprising considering he's just literally a foot over some of these players that he's playing against. But the thing you have to remember is, like, for a guy who's 6'8", in the Swedish leagues, he's probably not very fast. And so he's performed really well on a lot of our models, especially last year. He hasn't really gotten much of a chance in the SHL, but that's probably because he's on Team Frölunda. So if you're looking for a really deep fantasy guy to pick up, I would definitely recommend grabbing him. He's a very, very interesting player to watch.
So, question for you. Do you think his goals are more rebound and tip-ins, or are these more legit shots and him finding corners? Are you able to determine that, or is that more of a having to read it on your own kind of thing?
So that's kind of reading it on your own. We don't have the on-ice metric information, but it's got to be expected already, right? If you're 6'8", you're probably not going to be the guy who flies down from goal line to goal line and dangling and sniping, right? But he actually does a lot more of that than you might think. So if you can find any clips of him online, I mean, most of the highlights are going to be him in front of the net. But when you're 6'8" and you have got really good skill and you're really good at in close quarters, and obviously you're going to be able to overpower 90% of the players you're playing against. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very interesting prospect to look at. And most guys who are 6'5" and over that are forwards in the NHL, or even prospects, they normally don't pan out because they can't handle the role that they have to play. And in this scenario, Soderblom can do that. So he's obviously not going to be a super dependable player for any team that he plays on going forward, other than front net presence in the corners. He's going to win battles just by the sheer body that he brings.
Just a side tangent. You said he was drafted in 2019.
That's right.
So I think he was also on Team Sweden when Broberg came, when they were in Edmonton for the young guys, for the under 18s, I believe. And yeah. So watching him play, I do remember him, and actually I remember Broberg the most. He actually kind of took over the tournament, but this guy was actually really fun to watch. Like he hustled, and like he never quit on any play. So I'm no scout, but I know grit and I know determination, and this guy's got it. So that's actually a little bit of a cool player for you to bring up here. Number 4, what do you got for us?
So number 4 and 5, they're going to be 2 Finnish guys, and I mostly picked out players that were on teams of some relevance. There were a couple of guys on the Swiss and German team, but just considering that Germany has some COVID problems right now, and Switzerland's, they probably are not going to have very many points at all in this tournament. I just figured I would leave them out.
Okay.
So on Team Finland, you got a 19-year-old, 4th round in 2019. His name is Henry Nikon by the Jets. He's 6'4", 210. So he's also another big body. But so far in the Liga, he's actually had a pretty decent season. And he's on Ukrait, which is a, maybe one of the Frölundas of the Swedish league. But for Liga, it's one of the most storied franchises in that league, I'd imagine. And so far, he's at half point per game. Now, not a great plus minus so far, but I think that in this tournament specifically, he's going to be leaned on a lot more, considering he's a big body and he's been able to play really well against men. So he's definitely an interesting person to watch. You will definitely notice him on the ice, considering he's one of the bigger guys on his team.
Cool. So that's 4 and 5.
Last guy is going to be Matthias Mantikivi, and he got drafted 2019, 6th round. Thus far, he's got 4 points in 17 games in the Liga, and I just think that he hasn't really had his coming out party quite yet, but I think there's a lot of potential with him, and he's another guy to watch probably in the bottom 6, but don't be surprised if you see this guy play a couple of shifts with Brad Lambert. Brad Lambert will probably play on the wing, I would imagine, on the 2nd or 3rd line. So, considering Mantikivi's a center, he might play center in this tournament and probably in the bottom 6. So he might be a sneaky good grab if you're in any pools, because the idea of him playing with Lambert is pretty interesting, depending on how Team Finland wants to set up their lines.
And for those that don't know, give us a breakdown of Brad Lambert.
Yeah, so that kid's he's pretty prolific. He's a very interesting story because he's got a half nationality of Finnish and Canadian.
Traitor.
And he's played since 2015-16, but that was the last year he played in Canada, and then afterwards he's played for the U16 Pelicans, and then he moved up, and now he's on JYP. But he's by far one of the biggest names to come out of Finland, I'd imagine, at his age. He turned 17 yesterday, so he's basically a 16-year-old playing in the Liga, and he's got 7 points in 18 games already. And so the fact that he can play against men tells me that he can absolutely play against these guys in the World Juniors. But I did leave him off because he's going to be a top 5 pick when he gets drafted. So,
yeah.
But he's also a prolific player, and whoever plays on his line is going to have a field day.
I believe Lambert's with Shane Wright in their draft. I think they're together, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so
I think you're right.
Yeah, and Lambert's in the same conversation as Wright, kind of thing. Even though Wright's like the consensus number 1, but people do have that idea of Lambert being kind of neck and neck with him too. So he is that good. So
he really is. He really is.
Yeah, I've been following him big time because I have one of my leagues is just an ultimate tank league. I just suck so hard at it. So I have to look at prospects 5 years down the line, and this guy's been on my eye for a long time, and I'm pretty excited for him. I hope I get a chance to draft him. If I do, I'll probably trade him because I'm a dummy. So that's the top 5. Then I gave Rob. I asked him for 2 bonus players based on their high draft pedigree and the season they're having right now. Who do you think is going to light it up? Just so the fans can have some fun with having relished in their draft picks that they made.
Yeah, so it's got to be Lundell. I think the season that he's having so far, it's just, I wouldn't say I'm surprised, to be honest, because he had such a great season before. But the fact that you're performing at such a high clip, like he's 19, he just got drafted 12th overall, and he's got 12 goals in 17 games. He's over a point per game in the Liga, and that's considering that the Liga has higher talent in the league just because of how COVID has taken over the North American hockey scene. So he's, I'd say, by far the biggest name. He's not the most popular guy, but he's going to be the biggest name where you look at him and he's going to be top 3 in scoring, and you're going to go, whoa, right? So he's a very, very, very interesting player to watch. So definitely take a look at him when you watch the tournament.
Awesome. That makes me very excited. The whole time you were giving the bio there, I was dancing for people on camera because I drafted Lundell in a bunch of leagues. So very excited there. And number 2.
Yeah, so this was a hard one. It was going to either go to Phil Tomasino on Canada, or let's see here. Let me pull him up. It was going to be Rodion Amirov, and so he's on Team Russia. He got drafted 3 spots behind Lundell, and he's with the Maple Leafs. But he presents so much in a package that he could really play lights out in this league or in this tournament and be the highest point player, because when you've got a first line of Amirov, Kuznetsov, and Podkolzin, I mean, Amirov's going to be the setup guy. He's going to be the guy that puts in the points. So when you've got such a high-end first-line Russian team and maybe not as much on the back end, he's going to be utilized so much that his points are going to go through the roof, in my opinion. More than maybe Tomasino, just because Tomasino on Team Canada, there's 20 plus first round picks on that team.
Yeah.
They're all going to be fighting for playing time, and even though Tomasino's, in my opinion, going to be a fantastic player in this league, a guy like Amirov is just going to have so much more opportunity to get on the score sheet than any Team Canadian player. I wouldn't be surprised if the top 9 in Team Canada all has over a point per game. I just really wouldn't be that surprised.
Yeah, very interesting. So very cool picks. And then I asked Rob to give me a couple names of players that we might think struggle, or that we might see struggle, who have some recognition or weight behind being a high draft pick behind them. So, Rob.
Yeah, so it's probably going to come down to a lot of the guys in Team Canada, and it's not necessarily because they're not skilled, but it's more so, like I said, that this team is everyone being played, literally 95% of them will be first rounders, other than the goalies and 2 defensemen basically. So in my opinion, the guys who are going to have a little bit of trouble is going to be Jacob Peltier. I just don't see him having that much ice time. He's I think the smallest guy in the team. He's only at 5'9", and he hasn't exactly lit up the prospect scene. Not to say he's not a great pick, but he for a first round pick to play in the QMJHL, which right now is a very small league because only one of the divisions was playing. He's only had 13 points in 9 games, and not really any of them are goals. He's only scored 3 goals. So I think he's probably going to get through by the skim of his teeth and probably not perform well at all. He might even go pointless, depending on how much playing time he gets. I just don't see Peltier really having a fun tournament for anybody to watch, especially Flames fans.
Do you have any more names for us?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I could talk about a guy like Braden Schneider or Jordan Spence. I don't know exactly how much playing time they'll get. That's what it comes down to. And when you're a big name like Schneider, especially, I mean, he was one of the higher defensemen to be picked in this draft. I mean, you're gonna go look at the stats after the tournament and say, well, why did he play 7 games but only get 1 point? And that's not really a virtue of his skill. It's more so just it's going to be really tough to get a lot of playing time on this Canadian team. I mean, the only guys who I really see really lighting it up are the first and second line guys for this entire team. The Cousins, the Docks, the Bowen Byrams, the Drysdales, those guys are going to get all the playing time and probably be the ones to get on the score sheet most, because they're going to be playing on the same lines as the best players on Team Canada, which will inevitably be the best players in the tournament.
And then, how crazy is that first line for Canada?
It's just nuts.
It's going to be fun to watch. It reminds me of 2005 with Crosby and Bergeron and Corey Perry. I remember that picture. So I'm excited for them, but I'm also excited to see Team USA. not
Yep.
to watch them play, but to watch them lose. I hope Canada just takes the crap out of them. Rob, how do you feel about that?
I feel like you probably will be right. I think they Canada's got a lot of really high skilled guys, but I think if USA wins, it's going to be because they out hustled them. I mean,
Yeah.
they've got a lot of guys on this team that have played college hockey so far. Like majority of them are in the NCAA now, and a lot of them played last year. And so they're used to playing against guys that are 20, 21 years old who are full men, right? And in
Yeah.
juniors, you don't necessarily get to play against those guys as much. You're playing in the NCAA. The average height and weight difference is much higher than the junior leagues. And when you're such a high skill guy in the juniors, the opportunities that you get, you don't really see those big, mean, scary looking dudes because you'll just fly by them because they're 16-year-old big dudes who haven't developed yet. But in the NCAA, if you're Bobby Brink and you're playing on power play, you're going against defensemen that are 6'2", 6'3", 6'4", right?
Yeah.
So I think that these guys are going to be more durable. And I also think that the goaltending on USA is just like 10 times better. So, if you got Dustin Wolf or Spencer Knight in there and they're playing lights out, like good luck, Team Canada.
Yeah. Those,
That's where it's going to come down.
yeah, those are all very interesting points, and I just don't like that you're being too modest here. I was trying to stir a little bit of hate between us. Just so the people know, I'm based out of a little bit out of Edmonton here, and for Rob, where are you based out of? Just so people understand.
Metro Detroit.
Yeah, so Rob's the American, I'm the Canadian, so I'm just trying to stir up a little bit of hate here. And so this wasn't a question I gave him, but just curious for my own fantasy hockey teams. But what do you think about Broberg? What kind of tournament do you think he's going to be in line for?
Now let me pull up the roster again, just so I get a better look of how much time he'll actually get. I mean, at first thought, I feel like he's got to have a decent tournament. I mean, the only problem, I guess, is he's got Soderstrom and Bjornfoot that are going to be vying for some play time, and you got Albert Johansson, who has had a great year so far. And so obviously Broberg's probably got a little bit of an advantage of playing time because he is the captain, right? So he's going to be at the beginning expected to contribute a ton. And so far he's had a pretty okay year in the SHL. It seems like this year is much more of a high scoring year. But I think Broberg's probably going to have a pretty good tournament. I could easily see him putting up 5 points in 7 games, 6 points in 7 games. But I could easily see him drop down and only get maybe 2 or 3 because, when you got a guy like Soderstrom playing on the power play or Bjornfoot, who I know that the SHL team really likes to play, you might not get that much power play time unless they run 2 defensemen on a power play unit.
Okay, so yeah, that was my next question. I was going to ask, who do you think runs the power play? But you already did that for me there. I guess that about does that for that part of the segment. And then the second part of the segment was, for those that you don't know, we have another podcast on the website, and it's called The Den. And in it, Dubas and I, we bet money that we don't really have to try to win money to feed my cryptocurrency addiction. So the goal I gave Rob was to essentially break down the list with his algorithms in terms of ranking the best to the worst teams. And then from there, I'm going to take that list to the Den, and then me and Doobie are going to do some high-end betting. So I'll post some links, and then I'll share the website podcast at the end. But Rob, right now, can you give me your list?
And this is for the teams, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if I'm gonna put any money on anything, I'm gonna expect Canada to come out of Group A pretty unscathed. It's especially with Germany, who could have been a pretty decent team. They're down to 17 forwards right now. So I just don't see any problem with Canada just rolling through basically every team, including Finland. I mean, I think Finland's, they're obviously the second best team in this group, but I'd say from an advantage standpoint, Canada's got to have it in this division. especially because of Germany going down, And then for B, it's a much harder question, but at the end of the day, I think I really see Sweden getting by USA. I think Sweden's had such a great track record of playing in this tournament that it's hard to stack the odds against them. And when you got a guy like Raymond on this team, you've got such a great back end with obviously Bjornfoot, Broberg, Soderstrom. Niederbach's a great player to play in your second or first line. Obviously Holtz. I mean, the star power of this team, I think collectively, is potentially better than the USA's collective star power. You've got Zagreus. Let's see. You've got. I'm flipping between two lists here. So Zagreus, Turcotte. Brink's probably going to play a decent amount. You got obviously Kaliev, who's going to be a power play wizard. But then on D,
Caulfield.
Yeah, Caulfield, of course. So those forwards are really going to try to lock down the power play, and so they've got to score on that. But I think they've got a lot of creativity. But I think where USA loses in the matchup is their defense. I don't think a guy like Henry Thrun or Hunter Skinner can maybe keep up with Holtz and Raymond on any given time of sheeted of ice. Maybe it's 5-on-5, 4-on-5. I just there's some decent offensive firepower on the USA team, like Ryan Johnson. He's a very interesting pick, and I think he fell in a lot of fantasy drafts just because of the numbers that he had in the USHL, and he had a pretty boring 2019-20 season, but he's already off to a pretty good start this year. But I just see Sweden squeaking by Team USA, I think.
Another reason why that you didn't mention, but would be goaltending.
Yep.
I think Sweden's got the best goalie going into this draft this year, and he projects to go higher than Askarov went at 11 for Nashville in 2020. So, Rob, can you give us a quick breakdown of who that goalie is?
Yep. So obviously Wallsted's going to be the big name coming into the draft. He's the undrafted guy, and he's really looking like a guy that could push back Askarov from the first spot for goalie prospect to Wallsted at number one. I mean, if you look at Wallsted's career history, I mean, he's literally never had under a 900 save percentage, and pretty much every season it's been over a 920, other than his 18-19 J20. It's frankly incredible. So,
steady.
He's I don't know how many games he's going to play, because when you got a guy like Allenfelt in front of you, I'm not too sure, but I do know that he's going to be the backup. He's going to play over Calle Klang. But yeah, between Allenfelt and Wallsted, I mean, they're in some pretty good hands, and both of these guys have been playing in front of professional athletes, full blown. So, this is going to be a little bit easier, I think, from a performance standpoint. Maybe not as much from a pressure standpoint, because it's, you're playing for your World Juniors team and you're nervous. But, if there's any goaltending group that's going to unhinge the USA's group, it's going to be Sweden.
Yeah, my thoughts exactly. But with that being said, where do you put Russia between those two teams?
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, it's going to go Sweden, USA, Russia. I think if you're going to give the gold medals, it's going to go gold to Canada, Sweden gets the silver, and I think USA gets the bronze.
Okay, perfect. Last one, Slovakia, Switzerland, Germany. Can you rank those three for me, just so I'm not confused?
Yeah, so I think by virtue of the Germany team having so little players, I think the Swiss are going to be the third best in A, and then you're going to get Slovakia. Well, no, that's a toss-up between Germany and Slovakia. I mean, I feel like skill-wise, it's got to be Germany, but I probably got to go Germany as the fourth best, so second worst, right? And then Slovakia last.
So yeah, the goal is I want to buy a 16 team or 16 game ticket, put I don't know, $50 on it, and I want all 16 games to hit. So Rob, I'm following this to a T, and well, you gave me your address for the podcast just because, so I know where you live.
Oh, good.
If
Good.
you screw me here, Rob, I swear, I know what to do.
Okay.
So with that being said, I think that's it for the podcast. I really appreciate your knowledge here. What I'd like to do though before we leave is make a friendly wager that if Canada plays USA, let's put 10 fantasy fab on the deal. Whatever country wins, loser has to give 10 fab in our fantasy dynasty league.
Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. Okay, so that about does it here for us. What I'd like everybody to know is that Rob has Fantalytica on a website, fantalytica.tech. So it's not open just yet, but if you plug in your email, you'll get a ping, and it'll let you know once the website's up and running. So that's pretty exciting for us. So that's middle of January, and then on our website we have a bunch of podcasts released. I have a bunch of articles covering how you should go about entering your redraft leagues, how you should analyze players on your full dynasty team. So all things fantasy hockey we cover, and then my YouTube page at FantazyHockeyNewz with the S's being Z's. I do a bunch of live streaming and stuff like that. So we do a lot of things hockey. Visit our website, FantazyHockeyNewz. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Rob. Cheers, everyone. As always, love Bill and Rob.